Soren Grant stood at the edge of the small, worn porch, his boots heavy on the wood. The wind cut through the trees, carrying the chill of the coming winter. He pulled his coat tighter around himself, his eyes scanning the simple cabin ahead. The shack had once been a dream, a quiet place to escape his past, to forget the life he had left behind. But standing there, in the stillness of the forest, something about the place felt different now. He glanced down at the piece of paper clenched in his hand. He had paid $1 for this piece of land, a single dollar to own it, to call it his. But something more had come with that dollar, something he hadn't expected. The door to the cabin creaked open, the rusted hinges groaning like they hadn't been touched in years. A woman appeared in the doorway, her face framed by long, dark hair, her eyes tired but sharp. Lily Monroe. Soren had heard of her, the widow who had moved to the cabin just up the road with her young son. She had lost her husband in the winter months past, and the burden of surviving on her own had worn her down. Still, there was a strength in her that Soren respected. She wasn't one to ask for help, and that was exactly why he was standing here today, ready to make an offer he never thought he would. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, his heart beating a little faster than it should have. This wasn't just business. This wasn't just about the land. Lily, he began, his voice low, steady, but filled with a kind of weight that made her pause, her eyes narrowing. I've been thinking. She said nothing, only stood there, her arms folded across her chest, waiting for him to continue. I'm infertile, he said, the words leaving his mouth with surprising ease. I can't have children, and I need someone to carry on my name, my legacy. He paused, watching her closely, noting how her face stiffened, her brow furrowing. I can offer you something in return, a place to call home, security. Your son, Eli, will be my heir, in exchange for a marriage contract. Lily blinked, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she didn't speak. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, ready to snap. You want me to marry you, so my son can be your heir? She asked, her voice flat, barely above a whisper. Soren nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Yes, I need an heir to inherit my Apache, and in return, I'll provide for you and your son a future that's secure, a life free from worry. You'll have a home, a place to raise him, without the burden of struggling on your own. Her eyes flickered to the ground, her gaze shifting to the small boy playing near the fire pit in front of the cabin. Eli was too young to understand what was happening, but his innocent presence was a reminder of everything at stake. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stepped back into the cabin, her eyes lingering on Soren for just a moment before disappearing behind the door. Soren stood still, his hands still holding the crumpled paper, his heart hammering in his chest. Was this the right choice? He had offered her everything, a home, security, the kind of stability she had probably dreamed of. But at what cost? Moments later, Lily emerged again, her face pale but determined. She stepped down onto the porch, standing just a few feet away from him now, and met his gaze head on. Why do you need my son? She asked, her voice edged with something darker now. What do you truly want with him? You're offering me a home, a life, but it's my son that's at the center of it. Soren paused, the question catching him off guard. His instinct was to tell her the truth, to lay bare his loneliness, his need for someone to carry on the legacy of his family. But he couldn't bring himself to say it outright. Because I need an heir, he said simply, his voice more firm now. And I'm asking you to give me that. In return, I'll provide. You'll never want for anything again. Lily's eyes softened for just a moment, and Soren could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She was considering it, weighing the consequences, trying to figure out if this was truly her best option. He couldn't blame her for being cautious. Let me think about it, she said, her voice tight but steady. But understand this, Soren, my son is not a pawn in a game. If I say yes, it's because I believe this is the only way forward, not because you think you can buy us. Soren nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. He had offered a deal, but he understood that for Lily, the choice would not be simple. There was too much at stake, and he knew he couldn't force her to accept. "I'll leave you to think on it," he said, his voice softer now. "But time is running out. The offer stands as it is." With that, he turned and walked back down the path, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. As he left the cabin behind, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the choice he had set before Lily. He had given her the power to change everything. Now, all he could do was wait, and wonder if she would choose him, choose the life he was offering, or if she would walk away, leaving him with nothing but his empty Apache and a future that seemed increasingly bleak. The wind bit at Lily's face as she stood on the porch, her eyes fixed on the land stretching out before her. Soren's words echoed in her mind. "I need an heir, and I'll give you a home." She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. Soren's offer had come too suddenly, too boldly. Yet, there was a certain logic to it. A home for her and Eli. A future where they didn't have to worry about surviving month to month. But the price? Her son's future tied to Soren's legacy. Her marriage, her life, would be a transaction. Could she live with that? Eli, her bright, innocent son, was her world. The thought of someone else claiming him, even for something as simple as an inheritance, made her heart ache. Was it worth it? Could she trust Soren? Was he offering more than just security, or was this purely about his need for an heir? Her fingers tightened into fists as she thought back to her late husband. She hadn't loved him at first, either, but their bond had grown over time. Could that happen with Soren? She didn't know him, not really. After a long while, she couldn't stand the silence any longer. She turned and walked inside, Eli's quiet breathing the only sound in the cabin. She paused by his cot, her heart aching at the thought of making the wrong choice for him. This decision wasn't just about her. It was about Eli's future, a future she could barely secure on her own. But could she risk him being claimed by a man who only saw him as a means to an end? Soren sat in the empty cabin, the fire crackling in the hearth. His mind kept wandering back to Lily's face when he made his offer. He had expected shock, perhaps anger, but not the conflicted silence that followed. The truth was, he wasn't sure why he had made the offer in the first place. Maybe he had been lonely, maybe desperate for someone to carry on the legacy of the Grant name. But now, as he waited for her decision, he couldn't help but wonder if he had been too bold, too forceful. His hand rested on the table, fingers drumming lightly, as the clock in the corner ticked away the minutes. He had given her the choice, but what if she said no? What if she walked away, taking Eli with her? The Apache, his land. It all seemed meaningless without the family he'd hoped for. But he wasn't just offering her a life of comfort. He was offering them security, stability, something he couldn't give them if they stayed in that rundown cabin. Eli needed more than what Lily could provide on her own, and Soren had more than enough to give. It was all he had to offer, and for the first time, it felt like it might not be enough. The morning light filtered through the cabin window as Soren approached. He could see Lily standing by the door, her eyes cast downward, her posture tense. She had made her decision. Soren could feel it in the air, thick with the weight of what was about to come. "I've thought about it all night," Lily began, her voice quiet but steady. "And I understand what you're offering. Security for Eli. A future." Her eyes met his, searching, as though she was trying to read his intentions. But Soren's heart sank as the pause stretched on. "But," he asked, his voice tight with anticipation. "I can't just give him away, Soren," she said firmly, stepping forward. "He's my son. He's not some pawn to be traded for a future." Soren stepped closer, his heart pounding. "I'm not asking you to give him up, Lily. I'm offering him a life, a future. He'll be safe, cared for, and loved. He deserves more than I could give him alone. More than you can give him alone." Lily's gaze softened, but her resolve remained. "I don't know if I could trust you. You want an heir, but what happens when you have what you need? Will you still care about us then?" Soren took a deep breath, his voice low and sincere. Lily, I may need an heir, but I'm not offering this out of selfishness. I've spent my life alone. I'm offering you and Eli more than just a place to live. I'm offering a future where you don't have to worry about survival. A future where we build something together. The silence between them lingered. Lily stood still, her thoughts racing. What was she really afraid of? What if she said yes, and the future she was promising Eli turned out to be even worse than what she was already living? What if Soren didn't keep his promises? But the fear in her heart began to fade. She looked at Eli, then back at Soren. She was never going to find a perfect answer. This wasn't about perfection. It was about survival. And maybe, just maybe, Soren wasn't as bad as he seemed. I'll marry you, Lily said finally, her voice trembling slightly, but strong. But only because I believe in something better for Eli, not because of your legacy. Soren's chest tightened with relief, and something else, something deeper. He hadn't expected her to agree so easily, but now that she had, the weight of the promise he had made hit him full force. I won't let you regret it, Soren said softly, his voice filled with determination. You and Eli will be my family. No one will take you from me. Lily nodded, though the doubt still lingered in her eyes. She didn't know what the future held, but for now, this was the only path she could see. Soren reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You've made the right choice. As Lily stepped back into the cabin, Soren stayed outside for a moment longer, the wind brushing his face, the weight of his promise settling heavily on his shoulders. This was just the beginning. There was still so much to prove. And as he turned to head back inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that, somehow, he had just made the most important decision of his life. The first few days at Soren's Apache felt like a blur to Lily. The cabin, though far larger than her old home, felt empty, too large for just her and Eli. She kept telling herself that this was the right choice, that the Apache offered a future they could never have in their old life. But as she woke up each morning to the unfamiliar creak of the wooden floors and the smell of fresh bread Soren had baked, there was a gnawing feeling in her stomach. Eli seemed to settle in better than she had. The vast stretch of land was new to him, and every day he ran through the fields with joy in his eyes, as if he was just discovering the world around him. But Lily could not shake the discomfort in her chest. She had promised herself that this was for him, but as the days went on, she wondered how much of this life was for her. Soren, too, was a stranger to her. At first, she kept her distance, wary of a man who had made her such an impossible offer. He was polite, helpful, and did everything he could to make them comfortable, but his presence always felt distant. He did everything right, a little too right. There were no gestures of kindness that felt genuine, just a man fulfilling his role, doing what he promised. Still, she saw glimpses of something in him. Late one evening, after Eli had fallen asleep, she watched Soren from the doorway as he fed the horses. His movements were purposeful, sure, but there was an intensity in the way he handled the animals, as if they were the only thing in the world that mattered. He didn't look her way when he noticed her watching, but for the first time, she saw something beyond the man who had just wanted an heir. She saw someone who cared about something. But could she trust him? Lily was standing at the stove one evening, stirring a pot of stew, when Soren entered the kitchen. He had just returned from a far side of the Apache, his jacket covered in snow, his face flushed from the cold. She glanced at him, hesitant to say anything, but the tension between them seemed to linger in the air. "Anything I can help with?" he asked, his voice calm but purposeful. Lily hesitated, then nodded. "Could you chop the vegetables for me? Eli's been running all day, and I don't feel like I've had a moment to think." He nodded without protest and moved to the counter, his knife clicking against the wooden cutting board. The rhythmic sound filled the silence between them, neither of them speaking, but both acutely aware of the other's presence. After a few minutes, Soren broke the silence. "You're still adjusting," he said, his tone almost too casual. Lily didn't answer at first. She wasn't sure how to respond. The truth was, she hadn't adjusted at all. Everything about the Apache, from the wide, open spaces to the quiet nights, felt foreign to her. It wasn't a home yet, and she wasn't sure if it ever would be. "I'm not used to it," she said at last, her voice soft, almost apologetic. "It's so quiet here. Too quiet. I don't know how you can stand it." Soren set down the knife and looked at her. "I've had a lot of quiet. It's what I'm used to." His gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something vulnerable in his eyes. "But I'm not used to someone else here, either. It's been a long time since I've had a family." Lily paused, staring at him. His words surprised her. She had always seen him as a man driven by his need for an heir. But now, she could see that perhaps there was more to him. He wasn't just a man trying to continue his bloodline. He was a man who had been alone for far too long. For the first time, Lily let her guard down, just a little. "It's strange, she said quietly. "I thought I could do this on my own. I thought I could be enough for Eli. But now I don't know." Soren didn't respond immediately, but his expression softened as he turned back to the vegetables. He continued to chop, but there was something more thoughtful in his movements now, as if he was reflecting on her words. "You're enough for him," Soren said after a moment. "But you don't have to do it alone anymore. That's what I'm here for. This is more than just a place for you to stay. This is a home. For both of you." Lily swallowed hard. His words were simple, but they hit her harder than she expected. The promise he made was slowly starting to feel less like a transaction and more like a genuine offer. But could she trust it? The next few days passed in a blur of daily routines. The Apache felt more like a place to survive than a home to build memories. Lily continued to struggle with the shift in her life, but little by little, she began to notice small changes. Soren wasn't as distant as he had been at first. When Eli tripped and scraped his knee, Soren didn't hesitate to comfort him, even offering to bandage the wound himself. Lily watched him carefully, noting how tender his touch was with Eli, how patient he was with a child who wasn't even his own. That was a side of him she hadn't seen before, and it made her wonder if she had misjudged him. But the doubts still lingered. She had agreed to marry Soren for Eli's sake, but what if things didn't turn out the way she hoped? What if this life, with all its comforts, didn't bring the happiness she had imagined? One evening, as she and Soren worked side by side to stack firewood, the question returned to her. Could she really trust him? Could she trust this new life she was building? As they finished, Soren turned to her, his face serious. "I don't know if this is what you expected, Lily. I didn't expect it either. But I promise you this. You and Eli won't be alone anymore. You have a family now, and I'll protect that family." Lily met his gaze, and for the first time, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe she had made the right choice after all. The future still felt uncertain, but she was starting to believe that, for the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was building something real. The days continued to pass in a quiet rhythm at Soren's Apache. Lily worked alongside him, the familiar weight of her duties filling her hours. She learned how to handle the horses, how to chop firewood, and how to tend to the small garden they had started near the cabin. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of routine, a comfort in the familiarity of the tasks. Eli thrived in the open space. He spent hours running around the fields, his laughter echoing through the trees, a sound that had been sorely missing from Lily's life. She watched him with a sense of pride and relief. Here, on the Apache, Eli was free. He was growing up in a way she never imagined he would, away from the cramped rooms and endless struggle. But still, despite the growing sense of security around her, something gnawed at Lily's heart. She had agreed to marry Soren for Eli's sake, but as the days turned into weeks, she began to question her decision. Soren was kind, dependable, and his affection for Eli seemed genuine. But it was all too perfect, too calculated. She had seen men like him before, those who knew how to offer security but had little else to offer. Soren hadn't shown her his heart. Not yet. One evening, as the light began to fade and the shadows stretched long across the fields, Lily sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the horizon. Soren was inside, cleaning the kitchen, a quiet hum of activity drifting from the cabin. The sound of Eli's footsteps pattered through the yard as he made his way toward her, his face flushed with the excitement of another day spent exploring the land. "Mama," Eli called out as he climbed up beside her on the steps, his small hand reaching for hers. "Look, I found a bird's nest." Lily smiled at her son, ruffling his hair. "You did, huh? Let me see." Eli proudly presented his find, a small twig nest tucked gently in his hands. Lily's heart swelled with love as she looked at him, so innocent and full of wonder. For a brief moment, her worries about Soren, about the Apache, about their future, faded away. This was what she had wanted for Eli: freedom, happiness, and a chance to grow. But as she held the nest in her hands, the knot in her stomach returned. Would she ever truly be free in this life? Would she ever be able to trust Soren with her heart as she had trusted him with Eli? Inside the cabin, Soren moved about the kitchen, the soft scrape of a knife on the cutting board filling the silence. Lily's thoughts had returned to him again, to the way he moved through the house, so at ease in this life. He was no longer the stranger who had made her a proposal. He had become a man she had come to rely on. But there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when she wondered if she had made a mistake. Soren had shown her only kindness since her arrival, but there was always something about him that fell out of reach. A man who had offered her security, but never shared much of himself. She had asked him about his life before the Apache, but he always deflected, choosing instead to focus on the present. One evening, as they sat across from each other at the dinner table, Lily couldn't hold back her question any longer. "Soren," she began, her voice soft but persistent, "what was your life like before this? Before the Apache?" Soren paused mid-bite, his eyes flicking to hers. He set down his fork and took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the table. For a moment, Lily thought he might refuse to answer, as he often did. But then he spoke. "I was alone," he said, his voice low. "I grew up on this Apache. It's been in my family for generations. But after my father died, I had no one. No family left. I never found someone who could carry on the name. That's why I offered you what I did." Lily studied him closely. There was something raw in his voice, something that hadn't been there before. It was almost as if he was confessing, not just about his need for an heir, but about the loneliness that had driven him to make such a drastic offer. "I don't want to be alone anymore," he continued, his voice softer now. "I thought I could buy my way out of it. But you're right, Lily. I never should have treated it like a transaction. I never wanted to make you feel like you were just a means to an end." Lily's heart tightened at his words, but she couldn't ignore the lingering doubt in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that what they were building, was real. But something inside her still hesitated. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said quietly. "Not yet. Maybe I was wrong to come here. I can't help but wonder if you just wanted someone to fill the emptiness. Someone to take the place of what you lost." Soren didn't answer right away. He stood up, pushing a chair back, and walked to the window. He looked out at the darkening landscape, the faint outline of the trees visible in the distance. For a long moment, he was silent, his back to her. When he turned back, his expression was somber. "Maybe I did. Maybe I still do," he said. "But I know one thing for sure. I don't want to lose what we've started here. Not after everything we've been through." Lily felt her heart flutter, unsure of what to say. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But the truth was, she wasn't sure if she could ever truly trust him or herself again. She stood up, walking toward the door. "I need some air." As she stepped outside, the cool evening breeze hit her face, and she breathed in deeply. She could feel the tension in her body, the weight of the decisions she had yet to make pressing on her chest. She knew that she had come to this Apache for a reason. That reason was Eli. But now, as she stood on the porch, watching the stars appear above her, she realized that the path she had chosen wasn't as clear as it had seemed. There were still questions, doubts, things that needed to be figured out before she could move forward. The next day, as Lily and Soren worked side by side in the garden, there was a quiet understanding between them. He had opened up to her in a way that he never had before, and she appreciated it. But there was still so much left unsaid. She couldn't shake the feeling that, even now, Soren was holding something back, and that, more than anything, left her unsure of the future. The days after Soren's confession had a quiet weight to them. They fell into their usual rhythm, working the land, feeding the animals, preparing meals. But something was different. Lily noticed it in the air. Soren was more distant than before, as if he had said too much and was now retreating back into himself. And Lily? She felt torn, unsure of what to think or feel. Eli, for his part, seemed oblivious to the tensions between his mother and Soren. He was content in his new world, laughing as he ran through the fields, exploring the forests that surrounded the Apache. It was clear to Lily that the life they had now was a good one for Eli. She couldn't deny that. But for herself, she still wasn't sure. There were moments when she saw Soren's vulnerability and other times when she questioned his motives. Was he truly looking out for them? Or was this all just part of his need for an heir? One crisp morning, the answer came in the form of a loud knock on the door. Lily was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, when she heard the sound. Her heart skipped a beat. Soren, who had been working on repairs outside, stiffened and walked quickly to the door. A group of men stood on the porch. Their faces were grim, hard, and their clothing suggested they weren't the usual neighbors. The one in the front, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped forward. "Soren Grant?" he asked, his voice gruff, eyes narrowing when he saw the gun slung across Soren's shoulder. "Yes," Soren replied, his tone cautious but not hostile. "What do you want?" "We've come for the boy," the man said, his gaze flicking to Eli, who had been playing by the fire pit near the porch. "The one you're raising. He's supposed to be mine." Lily's breath caught in her throat. She froze, her hands gripping the counter as she processed the words. "What do you mean?" she asked, stepping toward the door. "Eli is my son. He's not yours." The man's expression hardened. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you, and we aim to take it back." Soren stepped in front of Lily, blocking her view of the man. "You have to go through me first." The man smirked, his eyes gleaming with something dark. "If you think that's how this is going to end, you're mistaken." Soren's hand tightened around a rifle slung over his shoulder. "You're not taking him." The man studied Soren for a long moment, then gave a low chuckle. "You're making a mistake, Grant. You don't know what you're dealing with." Without warning, the men turned and walked off the porch, heading toward the tree line. The leader's words hung in the air, thick with menace. "We'll be back," he called, not bothering to look back. "And next time, you won't have any time to play hero." Lily stood there, her mind racing. Who were those men? What did they want with Eli? She couldn't believe what she had just heard. They were after her son and Soren. Her husband had just stood in front of them, ready to fight for him. "Who were they?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper as she turned to Soren. Soren didn't answer immediately. He stood still, watching the men disappear into the trees. His jaw was clenched tight, his face unreadable. "They're not people I want to deal with," Soren said finally, his voice tight. "I don't know how they found us, but we'll have to be ready." Lily's heart hammered in her chest. What does this mean? Why do they want Eli? Soren looked at her, his eyes dark and serious. "There are people out there who want to control this land." And Eli, his voice trailed off for a moment, and Lily saw the pain flash in his eyes. "He's tied to this land in a way we don't understand yet. They think they have a claim on him." Lily felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The Apache, the life they were building, had been a dream, a fresh start. But now, it felt like it was crumbling in an instant. She looked at Eli, who was still sitting by the fire pit, his innocent smile untouched by the danger looming over them. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice shaking. "We prepare," Soren said. "We make sure they don't get close to him." The next few days were filled with tension. Soren worked in silence, his every movement calculated. He made sure the cabin was fortified, checking the windows and doors, placing what little furniture he had against the walls to create makeshift barricades. Lily watched him, unsure of what to do. She had never been in a situation like this, and the idea of fighting, of defending her son against men who believed they had a right to him, felt impossible. But Soren was ready to fight, and as she watched him prepare, a strange sense of calm began to wash over her. She wasn't alone. For the first time since arriving at the Apache, Lily realized she had someone in her corner. But the nagging fear wouldn't go away. The men had threatened Soren, but what would they do if they returned? How far would they go? That night, as they sat by the fire, Lily tried to focus on Eli's laughter, the way he was playing with his toy soldiers, unaware of the impending danger. Soren sat beside her, his eyes distant as he watched the flames crackle. He hadn't said much all day, but she knew the weight of the situation was pressing on him. "You know they'll come back," Lily said quietly, breaking the silence. "And we'll have to fight. But what if we're not enough?" Soren turned to her, his face hardening. "We will be enough. They won't take him. I won't let them." Lily nodded, though doubt still lingered in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that everything would be okay. But the fear that they were outmatched, outnumbered, gnawed at her. "What if I'm not strong enough?" she asked, her voice breaking as she looked at him. Soren reached out, taking her hand in his. "You're stronger than you think. We're in this together." And for the first time since coming to the Apache, Lily believed him. She wasn't alone. They weren't alone. Together, they would protect Eli, no matter the cost. The next morning, Soren gathered his tools and prepared to head into town for supplies. He was leaving Lily and Eli behind, knowing that the danger was still close. As he walked out the door, Lily followed him to the porch. "I'll be back soon," he said, his voice steady. "Don't open the door for anyone but me." Lily nodded, but as she watched him leave, a cold feeling settled in her stomach. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew one thing for sure. The fight for their family had only just begun, and there was no turning back now. The days after the threat had passed were marked by a tense stillness. Every noise, every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through the trees seemed to send Lily into a panic. Soren, however, seemed focused, laser-focused on preparations. He spent long hours on the Apache, fortifying the cabin, checking the perimeter, and ensuring that no one would slip past his defenses. Lily couldn't deny that there was something reassuring about Soren's determination. He wasn't afraid, but she couldn't shake the nagging question that had been circling in her mind since the men had left the first time. Why did they want Eli so badly? She had asked him before, but he had only given her vague answers. "It's not about you," he had said. "It's about the land, the legacy." But Lily wasn't sure if that was all of it. There was something more to his silence, something he wasn't telling her, and it had nothing to do with protecting the Apache. One evening, after dinner, Lily and Soren found themselves alone by the hearth. Eli had already gone to bed, his small form curled beneath the covers, blissfully unaware of the danger that had hovered over them for days. Lily sat quietly, her fingers wrapped around a warm mug of tea. Soren was across the room, staring at the fire, his jaw set in that familiar, determined way. She had tried to ignore it, tried to dismiss it, but now she had to ask. "You've been distant," she said quietly, her voice soft but steady. "Why? Why are you really doing this?" Soren stiffened, but didn't look up. The firelight flickered across his face, casting shadows over his features. "I'm doing this because I made a promise, Lily," he said, his voice low. "I'm not just protecting you. I'm protecting Eli too." Lily shook her head, her frustration building. "That's not what I'm asking. I know you're protecting us. But there's more to this, Soren. You don't just want Eli as your heir because you need someone to inherit your land. That's not the whole truth, is it? For a long moment, Soren didn't answer. He stared at the flames, the warmth of the fire barely reaching the cool distance between them. I've been alone for a long time, he said at last, his voice raw and quiet. I thought I could do this on my own. But I can't, Lily. I can't live with the emptiness. I thought if I had someone to carry on the name, the legacy of this Apache, I would finally have a family. Lily's heart sank as the weight of his words hit her. Soren had been hiding so much, more than just the fact that he needed an heir. He had been hiding his loneliness, his desperation for connection. But Eli isn't just a legacy to me, Soren continued, turning his gaze toward her. He's become more, much more. I see him not just as a child I'm taking in. I see him as someone I need, not for the land, not for my family name, but because I can't imagine a future without him, without both of you. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She had expected him to speak of duty, of his legacy, but this was something deeper, something she hadn't been prepared for. Soren had changed. He wasn't just offering a secure life for Eli anymore. He had come to care for them in ways she hadn't expected. For the first time, she saw Soren as more than a man with a past filled with empty promises. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes. I didn't think I was capable of caring for someone like I do for you both, Soren said, his voice trembling slightly. I know it's a mess, and I know I haven't made it easy, but I'm trying. I'm trying to make it right. Lily was silent, her emotions a tangled knot in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that what he was offering was real. But it was hard, so hard, to fully trust him when everything about their relationship had started out as a transaction. She took a deep breath, her mind racing with the truth of his words. I want to trust you, Soren, she said softly. But this isn't just about us anymore. It's about what Eli deserves. I can't let him be used as a pawn in your need for an heir. I won't let that happen. Soren's expression faltered. He took a step closer, his eyes locked on hers. Lily, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not asking for this because I want to control him. I'm asking because I can't let him go, and I can't let you go either. I've already lost so much of my life. I'm not going to let this slip through my fingers. Lily looked into his eyes and saw the depth of his regret, the weight of his own struggles. He wasn't asking for a family for the sake of power. He was asking because he needed them, not just as his heir, but as people who mattered. She felt her walls start to crumble, piece by piece. She had never expected Soren to admit something like this. He wasn't perfect, but neither was she. Soren, her voice caught in her throat, but she pressed on. I can't promise you that I'll always be okay with this, with all of this, but I can promise you this. Eli deserves more than just a father. He deserves someone who sees him, who loves him for who he is. And if you're that person, then maybe I'm willing to believe in you. Soren's breath stilled, and for a moment, everything felt suspended in time. He stepped closer to her, his hand reaching out, not to claim her, but to offer something he had never offered anyone before: trust. You're not alone anymore, he said quietly. Neither of you are. Lily looked at him, her heart still uncertain but beginning to open. The weight of her doubts didn't disappear, but she could feel a shift in her. Maybe they weren't perfect. Maybe their family wasn't born from love at first sight. But it was real. It was something they had built together, piece by piece. The air between them seemed to soften. It wasn't a fairy tale, and it wasn't easy. But for the first time, Lily felt like there might be hope. Real hope. For Eli, for her, and for Soren. Later that night, as they sat together by the fire, Lily couldn't help but notice the small, subtle changes. Soren had shared more of himself than he ever had before, and she found herself wanting to do the same. There was a strange comfort in the silence between them, a shared understanding that they were both vulnerable and afraid of what the future held. But they weren't alone anymore. Not in this house. Not in this life. And for the first time since coming to the Apache, Lily believed that together, they could face whatever was ahead. The night air was thick with tension. Soren sat by the fire, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the darkened trees. Every sound, every shift of the wind made his heart race. Lily sat across from him, her fingers nervously clutching the edge of her chair. Outside, the hooves of horses could be heard growing louder, crunching through the snow. The men were coming again. Soren had no illusion about what was at stake. They had threatened him once, and now, with darkness settling in, they were back. He didn't know how many there were this time, but he was ready. For Lily. For Eli. Lily stood up, her eyes flicking to the window. "Do you think they'll come tonight?" she asked, voice trembling. Soren didn't answer immediately. He knew what she was asking. The truth was they would come, and it would be soon. He stood, his voice firm as he looked at her. "We'll be ready." The door creaked open, and the cold wind swept in as Soren stepped outside. He didn't look back, but Lily could feel the weight of his determination. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew this wasn't just about the land. This was about something far deeper. It was about protecting Eli, and now, it seemed, it was about protecting each other. The cold night seemed to stretch on forever as the distant sounds of the riders grew closer. Lily kept her eyes on the door, heart pounding her chest. Outside, she could hear Soren speak, low and steady, but his words carried the weight of everything they had built. She didn't know how much longer they had before the men made their move. And then, through the window, she saw them. 3 figures moving through the snow, their dark shapes becoming clearer as they approached. The leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man, stepped forward. His voice rang out, cutting through the stillness. "Soren Grant," he called, his words dripping with menace. "We've come for what's ours." Soren stepped forward, rifle in hand, his stance unwavering. "You won't take him," he said firmly. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She had heard the words before, but hearing them now, knowing they were standing on the edge of something dangerous, made the reality sink in. She moved toward the door, her heart hammering in her chest. The leader smirked, his eyes locking onto Eli, who had ventured outside, his small figure barely visible in the snow. "You think you can keep him, Grant? He belongs to us." Soren didn't flinch. He kept his rifle trained on the man. "He's not yours." The leader stepped closer, but Soren held his ground. "You've made a mistake," the man sneered. "You'll regret this." Lily stood just behind Soren, her breath coming in shallow gasps as the men circled them. "You think you can protect her?" "Protect him?" the leader taunted. Soren was steady, his voice cold. "I will." Lily felt a sense of calm wash over her as she stood beside Soren. For the first time since this had all started, she wasn't afraid. Soren was ready to fight for them, and she knew, somehow, that they would make it through. Together. The leader's gaze flickered toward the cabin, then back to Soren. "This is your last chance, Grant. Step aside, and we'll let you live. Otherwise, you'll die for nothing." For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The night was still, the tension hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. And then it happened. The door to the cabin swung open. Lily stepped forward, her eyes fierce, her posture strong. "They're not taking Eli," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. The leader's eyes narrowed. "You think you can protect him?" he sneered. "You're just a woman." Soren turned to her, his gaze softening. "Stay behind me." But Lily shook her head. "I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not letting you fight this alone." Soren didn't argue. They stood together, facing the men as the leader's expression darkened. "You've made your choice," the leader said, his voice dripping with disdain. "We'll take him by force then." Lily's heart pounded in her chest, but Soren held her steady. He was ready. They both were. The sound of hooves suddenly broke the tense silence. More men, riders on horseback, emerged from the trees. They circled, closing in, but Soren never wavered. He kept the rifle steady, his eyes locked on the leader, who was now glaring at him with rage. "You think you can win?" The leader scoffed. "You're outnumbered." Soren's eyes never left his. I'm not backing down. With a sudden motion, the leader lunged, pulling a gun from his coat. But Soren was faster. The rifle fired, the blast deafening in the quiet night. The leader staggered back, surprised but unharmed. A second shot rang out, striking one of the men in the shoulder. He fell, clutching his arm in pain. The remaining two riders hesitated, their confidence faltering. The leader, now enraged, drew his pistol again. "You think you can stop me?" Lily stepped closer to Soren, her hand finding his arm. "We're not going anywhere." The leader's expression twisted with fury. "You'll regret this. We'll be back. And next time, you won't be able to stop us." Without another word, he turned and motioned for the other men to follow. They retreated into the trees, leaving the clearing in eerie silence. Lily stood still, her breath coming in uneven gasps as she processed what had just happened. They had won, for now, but she knew it wasn't over. The leader's words lingered in the air. They would be back. Soren lowered the rifle, his hands shaking slightly, but his gaze never left the trees. He turned to Lily, his voice low. "We'll be ready." Lily nodded, her hand still gripping his arm. "I won't let them take Eli," she said firmly. "Not now. Not ever." Soren's heart swelled with a sense of pride and relief. For the first time, he saw her as a partner, as a warrior in this fight for their family. They had faced their first test, and they had survived. But Soren knew that the true battle was still to come. He didn't know when they would return, but one thing was clear. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Lily stepped closer to him, her hand gently resting on his chest. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Soren smiled, the weight of their shared victory settling over him. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. As they stood together, side by side, the wind picked up, carrying with it the promise of more challenges. But for the first time since they had met, Soren felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope.